Mr. Chairman, I rise today on behalf of our country's veterans who make great sacrifices to keep America safe. When they return home from service, it's our responsibility to ensure they receive the care and support of a grateful nation. For far too many veterans, that responsibility is not fulfilled. The government's failure has tragic consequences for those struggling with mental health illnesses. September is Suicide Prevention Month. Americans across the country take time to raise awareness about the tragedy of suicide. We lose an estimated 20 veterans to suicide each day, and that is unacceptable. Every year since I have been in Congress, we have brought together Republicans and Democrats to draw attention to veteran suicide and send a clear message that this epidemic must end. Honoring our commitment to veterans is not a partisan issue. We know the only way to achieve real, lasting change for our nation's bravest men and women is to bring both parties together to solve this problem. Today, members from both sides of the aisle have joined me to bring awareness to veteran suicide, and we're working together to find solutions. I know we can make bipartisan progress because we've done it before. We've shown it's possible for both parties to work together to improve veterans' mental health care. After hearing the tragic story of a young Arizona veteran who lost his life to suicide in 2013, my team worked across the aisle to pass a bill that improved life-saving VA mental health services for veterans with classified experience. It took 3 years of hard work, but our bill is now law, and it helps veterans successfully transition to civilian life. It's important progress, but there's still so much work left to do. We must serve our bravest men and women just as they have served us. We challenge the VA, the Department of Defense, and our fellow lawmakers to join us in confronting the tragedy of veteran suicide. We must do more to honor our commitment to Americans' veterans. Today and every day, we stand with military families who've lost a loved one to the tragedy of suicide. And we say to you, your family's sacrifice will not be forgotten. We will not stop until every veteran receives the care that he or she needs. Mr. Speaker, for many veterans, the return to civilian life can feel overwhelming. Ensuring enough community support and mental health resources are available is essential. We recently heard from Andrew, who lives in Chandler, Arizona. He joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old when he said he was full of motivation and excitement to serve. I wanted to do my part to serve America, Andrew said. As an anti-tank assaultman, Andrew fought beside incredible Marines in Iraq. And when he finally returned home, he said, he returned with memories of death. Andrew leaned on loved ones and his faith to pull him out of his darkness. Ever since, he has continued his healing journey by serving his fellow veterans, and he presses forward with the values instilled in him in the Marine Corps: honor, courage, and commitment. The responsibility to care for our veterans belongs to all of us. That's why we're working with those who interact with veterans each and every day: letter carriers, librarians, grocery store clerks, academic advisors. We're giving community members the tools they need to support veterans every day, right where they live and work. We're also working to increase the number of peer supports available to veterans. There are veterans like Andrew who use their experiences, struggles, and accomplishments to help fellow veterans successfully navigate the transition to civilian life. I want to take a moment to thank my colleague and friend, Congressman Mast. While he spoke very eloquently about his fellow veterans and commitment to service and leaving no man behind, he was very humble and didn't share all of his own experiences. Congressman Mast served as a staff sergeant in the United States Army and has earned a Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and many other awards for his bravery during battle. And when Congressman Mast joined Congress, I'll never forget the first time we had a few moments to spend together. And I asked him about his own experiences in the military and since then, and the change that happened in his life after he was injured in battle defending our country. And I'll never forget Congressman Mast's response, which was one of such strength and character, and I believe provides such inspiration to other men and women in our country, both those in uniform and those who've returned to civilian life as veterans. I want to thank him for his service and for his incredible dedication to helping his fellow men and women who've returned home from battle as well. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, Congressman. Earlier in our special order, I mentioned the story of a young veteran in my district. His name was Sergeant Daniel Somers. Sergeant Somers was an Army veteran of 2 tours in Iraq. He served on Task Force Lightning, an intelligence unit. He ran over 400 combat missions as a machine gunner in the turret of a Humvee, and part of his role required him to interrogate dozens of terrorist suspects. His work was deemed classified. Like many veterans, Daniel was haunted by the war when he returned home. He suffered from flashbacks, nightmares, depression, and additional symptoms of post-traumatic stress made worse by a traumatic brain injury. Daniel needed help. He and his family asked for help. But unfortunately, the VA enrolled Sergeant Somers in group therapy sessions, which he could not attend for fear of disclosing classified information. Despite requests for individualized counseling or some other reasonable accommodation to allow Sergeant Somers to receive appropriate care for his PTSD, the VA delayed providing Sergeant Somers with the appropriate support and care. And like many, Sergeant Somers' isolation got worse when he transitioned to civilian life. He tried to provide for his family, but he was unable to work due to his disability. Sergeant Somers struggled with the VA bureaucracy. His disability appeal had been pending for over 2 years in the system without resolution. Sergeant Somers did not get the help he needed in time. On June 10th, 2013, Sergeant Somers wrote a letter to his family. I share a part of his letter every year, here on the floor in memory of Daniel's pain and in love for his family. In this letter, Daniel said, I am not getting better. I'm not going to get better, and I will most certainly deteriorate further as time goes on. He goes on to say, I am left with basically nothing. Too trapped in a war to be at peace, too damaged to be at war, abandoned by those who would take the easy route, and a liability to those who stick it out and thus deserve better. So you see, not only am I better off dead, but the world is better without me in it. This is what brought me to my actual final mission. No one who returns home from serving our country should ever feel like he or she has nowhere to turn. Which is why I'm committed to continuing to work on both sides of the aisle to ensure that no veteran ever feels trapped like Sergeant Somers did, and that all of our veterans have access to appropriate mental health care. But Sergeant Somers' family, his story is too familiar to many families. His parents, Howard and Jean, were devastated by the loss of their son, but they bravely shared Sergeant Somers' story and created a mission of their own. Their mission is to ensure that their son's memory brought to light America's deadliest war, the 20 veterans that we lose every day to suicide. Many of my colleagues here in Washington have met with Howard and Jean. They're working with Congress and with the VA to share their experiences with the VA healthcare system and find ways to improve care for veterans and their families. We worked very closely with Howard and Jean to develop and sign into law the Sergeant Daniel Somers Classified Veterans Access to Care Act. This is a law that ensures that veterans like Daniel, who've had classified or sensitive experiences, can access appropriate mental health services at the VA. Our law directs the Secretary of the VA to establish standards and procedures to ensure that any veteran who participated in classified missions or served in a sensitive setting may access mental health care in a manner that fully accommodates his or her obligation to not improperly disclose classified information. The law also directs the Secretary to disseminate guidance to employees of the Veterans Health Administration, including mental health professionals, on standards and procedures about how to best engage veterans during the course of mental health treatment with respect to classified information. And finally, Our law directs the Secretary to allow veterans with classified experiences to self-identify so they can quickly receive care in an appropriate setting. But that victory is just one small step forward. We still have so much work left to do. I want to thank my colleagues for joining us this evening to talk about the scourge of veteran suicide. This is our 6th year of hosting this special order in a bipartisan way together, and I look forward to the year when we do not need this special order because we have ended the crisis of veteran suicide in our country. Until such time, I pledge to continue working with my colleagues to not just tell the stories of veterans who are struggling, veterans who've made it, or veterans we've lost, but to celebrate our victory of overcoming this crisis and ending this scourge.